welcome everybody. We appreciate everyone taking the time this afternoon to join us. And I am Erin Reppy, and I work as the Assistant Financial Planner here with James. And we hope that you all are doing well. First off, I'm going to start off with some housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded. A replay will be made available after the session. We will email that to you. And everyone here has been placed on mute. We cannot see or hear you during the presentation, but hopefully you can see and hear us. And questions can be entered through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Due to time, we're trying to keep this right at 25 minutes, and we're just not going to answer questions during this, but we will do so afterwards in a recap or an email. So we will go ahead and get started here. And I just want to welcome all of you, and I'd like to introduce James. If most of you know him, if you don't, and you'd like to follow him on Twitter, here is his Twitter handle, JWilsonSC. And if you're not connected with him on LinkedIn, please go ahead and do that today. So here I'm going to introduce James, and take it away.
Thanks very much, Erin. This is our inaugural 5 and 25 webinar. We did one last month with Apollo Lopescu at Dimensional, and that went well, so we thought we'd try it on our own, and we appreciate your attending today. The topic, 5 things to do when you don't know what to do, I thought was apropos for our current environment, and we'll do different topics in the future. If you have any you particularly want us to cover, please send us a note and let us know. You know, today we have numerous concerns that affect both our physical and financial well-being, and perhaps more so than any time in our lives. And I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of step back and say, you know, what are we really talking about? What do we really need to do, and go back to base, as people would say. Many of you have read Simon Sinek's book, Why, and we talk a lot about that with people here, is why. Why are you willing to take risks? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? And sometimes people, frankly, don't understand that. And so we kind of back from there and say, look, what are you trying to accomplish, and who are you trying to protect? Because usually it involves one of those two things, if not both of those two things. So that's really kind of how we try to build out the why. Oftentimes, when I ask people this, why, they give me all these really nice sounding goals or aspirations. And really I've come to name those a goals hole. So I really caution you not to think about this as a goals hole. Just really nice sounding things that really don't apply to you. They really don't connect your why with, you know, what you want to accomplish. It can't be your neighbor's goals. It can't be your spouse's goals. It can't be, you know, your across the street colleagues' goals. So they have to be very personal. They have to be yours. So why, what are you trying to accomplish? Who are you trying to protect? That's where everything starts there. Nothing else works without that. We go around the horn there to plan. And sometimes the word plan kind of is off-putting to people. And I've learned this over time. So I really talk about action steps. Action, because we can have a nice plan and it can be very complicated, it can be very long, it can be very short. But as long as it doesn't have action steps, really it's no good. We had a client years ago who brought me a very nice leatherette binder with a plan, financial plan that he had done elsewhere. He moved here from the middle part of the country, and he had it for years. And this is probably 20 or 25 years ago, and he had paid $5,000, 25 years ago, $5,000 for this plan. And he came in here about probably a few years after he had done that and said, you know, this was totally worthless because I didn't do anything. I didn't do any of the recommendations. I paid the money. I set it up on the shelf. It looked nice. Didn't do anything. So we kind of go the opposite direction. We say, look, let's have action steps. And what I've learned is that if you give people very, very big action steps or long action steps, they don't get accomplished. So we call them micro action steps now. Let's do very short action steps, things that we can accomplish today, next week, next month, maybe in the next 6 months, so that you get some feeling that we're on track. Otherwise, I think people become very, very frustrated with this. Side by side to the action steps is behavior. And this is something that we're all very blind to, all of us. All of us are basically a bundle of emotions. And our behaviors and our behavioral biases, which we're very, we're unaware of generally, make up the context for our decisions. We'll deny it and we'll say that's not true, but it is true because we're human beings. We make decisions. We make all our decisions with our emotions. We're blessed. We deal with very smart clients, and basically smart people say, no, I use my head. I use my rationale instead of my emotions. But we all really make decisions emotionally. From there, we kind of go around the horn to investing. So in investing, it really involves coming face to face with, I'm taking risk. I have uncertainty. I understand that. Because there's nothing that starts without that. Years ago, 2 years ago, I think, maybe 3, there was a big fire in California. Of course, there are fires almost every year in the Malibu area. And it was written up, there was this director, minor kind of director, sci-fi kind of film director, that had his house burned down. And he was a very conservative investor. Really, to call him an investor is a stretch, because he really didn't believe in banks or investment firms. So he had all his money, and he made some money because he had a house in Malibu. So he had made some money, and he had all of his money in cash in his house. His house burned down. He and his wife escaped the house with their clothes on their back and a few dollars in their pocket. That was it. So what he thought he had was a riskless investment. Turned out to be highly risky. So we caution people, there's really no such thing as a riskless investment. People talk about it all the time. You hear TV ads and radio ads for it all the time. There is no such thing. And so everything involves risk. Everything that you invest in involves some risk. And one of the things we just try to get people to understand is nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. You can look at the TV stations, everyone you want to, all day long. You can look at the internet all day long and listen to all the experts all day long. They still don't know, and they can't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Then the last part of this, which I think is ignored largely, is reassess and adjust to new reality. This is really important now. I think we all can agree we have a new reality. And so your why may not have changed, but the micro action steps towards your why may have changed in this last few months because of this new reality. And so just to ignore the new reality and say, well, no, I've got this plan and my plan says do A, B, C, and D, and that's what I'm going to do. No, we have a new reality now. So we're going to have to make some mid-course corrections, as they say. And that's a very, very important and often ignored part of financial planning. The bucket plan, most of you who have worked with us know we use this a lot. It is frankly a stress reliever. The bucket plan is a great stress reliever. The few calls or clients we've talked to that had any concerns or nervousness in this past 3 months related to were they going to have to liquidate things at an inopportune time because of the crack in the market to meet their ongoing expenses. And the answer is, in every case, no, because every client we have and everybody we work with has a diversified portfolio with cash, near cash, and short-term fixed income investments. And so we kind of break things out very simply. You have a bucket, and there's actually 3 buckets from short-term, intermediate, and long-term. The short-term stuff is under 3 years, and it can be 4, it can be 2, but that's not sacred. But basically 3 years. Under 3 years, we have everything in cash, near cash, short-term fixed income instruments, so that if we hit the worst market environment that we've ever been in, then we can still kind of pay our expenses out of that bucket for a good long while without having to go into any of the other buckets and liquidate something at an inopportune time. So that's the reason for that. The middle bucket, the intermediate bucket, which is again kind of 3 to 10 years, and it can be 2 to 12, but 3 to 10, somewhere in there, 3 to 10 years, we have a mix. You would have a mix of growth investments, a mix, some fixed income investments, and we call that contingency because there are going to be things that happen that you don't plan for, that you didn't expect, contingencies. I remember, I'm a fan of the space program, and you look back and read some of the stuff on the old space programs, particularly the ones that didn't go well. We had all these thousands of scientists involved with those plans from Caltech and MIT, places like that. They were incredibly good scientists, and they still had things go wrong. They still had to have contingencies, and even they might have gone through all the contingencies and still had things that they didn't plan for and didn't expect and didn't anticipate. So as my mother would say, things do go bump in the night. And so we kind of have to plan for that. So the long term, beyond 10 years, is really aspirational stuff. What are your goals for long term? And we can be, that stuff is mostly growth, because we're not going to be worried about touching that for a long, long, long time. Your retirement plan might be a good example of that. So we kind of break out these buckets, and I think when we describe it with clients and talk with clients about it, once they understand it, they feel like, okay, this is a stress reliever. I understand that I don't have to worry about the day-to-day market because I've really got stuff for the years, and I've got stuff that's set up along the way for years. This is my favorite. Most of you know, if you're clients, that the randomness of return is really my favorite graphical representation of finance, personal finance. And so this is, most of you are aware, there's about a dozen or 13 different asset classes that are usually on this chart. We've kind of isolated them into two, because it gets very busy otherwise. 60-40 portfolio, which is the gray, and S&P 500, which is the orange or orangey color. And the interesting thing is that, so this is the highest return for the year and the lowest return for the year. So every year goes that way. We, again, isolated them. If you really looked at the whole chart, it'd be very busy to have all kinds of asset classes in here. But we just isolated these two purposely. We've used this chart for years. And the interesting thing is, and this has been true for a handful of years now, is that this chart goes 22 years. It covers from 1998 through the end of last year. And the interesting thing is you will see some years that are very different. For instance, 2000, well, you take it all the way back 1998, you have the S&P 500 way up here at 28.6, the 60-40 portfolio 10.5. So a big, big, big difference. Here in the middle years, they're pretty similar, right? Not a whole lot of difference. And as you go through the years, you will see there's no pattern. And that's why we call it randomness. There's no pattern to deciding, does this asset class do better than that asset class over long periods of time? It's totally random. The interesting thing is there are some inferences we can draw from this, however. So when you look at all of the years put together through 2019, so this is 22 calendar years. I know you can't see some of these small numbers perhaps. We're emailing you the slides after the webinar. You'll see them. The interesting thing, and this is held true for a handful of years, is the lower risk 60-40 portfolio has actually produced a higher return than the full 100% stock S&P 500. That may not be the case all the time, and it likely is not the case all the time, but it has been for a handful of years. And so it's very interesting that you can basically get market returns with less than market risk, which is, kind of intriguing for most of our clients. The even more interesting thing is you can do that, or have been able to do that for the past 22 years, with about 1/3 less risk or variability with the 60-40 portfolio versus the S&P 500. So randomness of return, my favorite chart of the day. We can do a whole webinar on behavioral biases, and we will in the future, because it's, again, one of the things I really think that we need to key on is behavior and not talked about enough. Confirmation bias is a biggie right now. We all kind of have narratives in our mind about this is what we think makes the world tick. This is what we think is right. This is what we think is wrong. And we filter information accordingly. And so things come across our eyeballs all day, and we say, right, wrong, absolutely not, absolutely yes. And nothing gets through that barrier except things that kind of support or reaffirm our preconceived notions. This is really problematic when it comes to making financial decisions, because confirmation bias, as bad as it is, quickly folds over to another behavioral bias called overconfidence. Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel laureate, Professor Daniel Kahneman, says that overconfidence is a curse. It's a strong word, a curse. And independent advice is the cure. So a curse and a cure. That's where we come in, the independent advice. You really can't handle this stuff by yourself. Kahneman talks about it in some of his writings that he can't handle it himself. I mean, he's one of the leading behavioral economists on the planet, but he still understands that he cannot handle it himself. But yet most people, or some people, walk around saying, I'm a smart person. I can make these decisions on my own. I can handle these behavioral biases. I can put them aside and make decisions. It's very, very, very difficult to do. So confirmation bias, folding over to overconfidence, are a real serious problem. This is a simple representation of growth of a dollar for the last 10 years, March 1st, 2010 through the end of February this year, which includes, I guess, the first 10 or 12 days of the bad part of the market. So the market cracked, I think, February the 19th, and it bottomed on March the 23rd. Here we are on May the 13th. So the market's actually gone up from the end of February when this chart shows, but you start at $1, you end at $3.29. It's actually probably a little higher than that now. So that's just a real quick, easy way to look at, why do you invest in the market? Why would you do that? Why would you take on the risk? This is, about as easy a representation as you can find. So let's summarize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sorry, I'm gonna go back. Guys, bear with us for a minute. We are having a connection issue for a second, so I'm just gonna hop back on real quick. And we did record this earlier today, and I will send you out the complete webinar. So we will go ahead. I'm sorry about that, but we'll go back to, go ahead, James.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Well, we wanted more of this slide anyhow. They wanted to see it again. So
sorry about that.
Aaron wanted to go twice. So start at $1, and most of you have seen the chart. Start at $1, and just this 10-year period ends at $3.29, which 2 months ago. So let's summarize, if we can, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got those, Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Determine your why. Determine your why. That everything starts there. Nothing else matters. If you don't know why, if you don't know why you're taking risk, if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, who you're trying to protect, we can't help you. I mean, there's really nothing to talk about. Remember the bucket plan. The bucket plan is a stress reliever. It helps you in times of stress. It helps you in times of uncertainty to kind of go back and say, I can go years through this slog. I didn't realize that was a word. I recently read it from an English writer. It is a word. So remember, returns are random. Randomness of return. You can't get out of the idea that you're going to pick an asset class coming out of this kind of market and say, oh, I think this asset class has done very poorly, so maybe it's going to do very well coming out. Just don't play that game. Play a diversified game and recognize that there aren't patterns. It's random. Stay in your seat, confirmation bias, and overconfidence really amount to trying to keep people from doing things that harm themselves. As Annie Duke, author Annie Duke, likes to say, saving yourself from yourself. And I think that's really what staying in your seat amounts to is don't do things. If you have a plan that's good and rational, stay with it. And finally, accept risk. Understand that everything you do in the investment world contains risk, and there's no way around it, and uncertainty is part of our environment. And that's the way it is. You can't accomplish things without that. So we appreciate your willingness to be here today. And if you want to talk to us about being your ally and advocate, we're certainly here and ready to talk or here when you're ready to move forward or talk with either of us about planning for the future. Thanks so much. Hope to see you again.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I will send out a recap, and we recorded this morning, so if there were any glitches in the beginning where the speech was delayed, I will go ahead and send you a recap with all of the subtitles so that we can get that to you. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thanks again, everybody.